Listen closely. I'll tell you something they never taught you in those fluorescent-lit classrooms, where love was explained with chemical equations and evolutionary imperatives. There's a room in Florence, or perhaps it only exists in the space between sleeping and waking, where Niccolo Machiavelli once sat writing by candlelight, not about princes and power, but about something far more dangerous. The architecture of human longing. The candle burns low. Wax pools like old promises. Outside, rain taps against windows with the persistence of a lover who knows you're home but pretending otherwise. Here's what the old Florentine knew but never quite dared to write in his famous treatises. Love operates on the same principles as warfare, but the battlefield is internal, and you are simultaneously the general, the soldier, and the territory being conquered. The greatest tactical error? Believing that surrender means victory. Picture this. A man stands before a mirror at 3 a.m., practicing conversations he'll never have with someone who stopped listening years ago. Each rehearsal perfects the prison bars. Each imagined reconciliation adds another lock. The Buddhists have a word, dukkha, but even they're too polite to mention how we decorate our suffering with silk ribbons and call it romance. There's a study from 2024. Researchers at Uppsala University discovered that men in unrequited love show brain patterns identical to gambling addicts hitting slot machines. The intermittent reinforcement schedule. The random reward. That text message at 2:47 a.m. that says nothing but keeps you betting everything. Your dopamine receptors don't know the difference between a jackpot and a red receipt. But here's the grotesque beauty of it. We're not victims. We're architects. Schopenhauer wrote about this while dying alone in Frankfurt, surrounded by poodles he trusted more than people. He called it the will to life, using us as puppets for its reproductive comedy. But he missed something crucial. Something Machiavelli understood in those Tuscan nights when he'd drink wine and argue with ancient Romans who existed only in his head. We choose the prison because freedom is more terrifying than chains we've learned to love. I knew a man once, let's call him Marcus, though that wasn't his name, who kept every text message from a woman who left him 7 years ago. 23,000 messages. He had them backed up in 3 different clouds, afraid of losing them like a medieval monk guarding illuminated manuscripts. When I asked him why, he said something I'll never forget. Without this pain, who would I be? The velvet prison, soft enough to feel like comfort, strong enough to hold you forever. You see, Machiavelli's great insight wasn't about being feared versus loved. It was understanding that humans will choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar joy every single time. We're pattern recognition machines gone haywire, finding faces in clouds and meaning in cruelty. A woman's indifference becomes a puzzle to solve. A man's emotional absence becomes a mountain to climb. We mistake difficulty for value, like those restaurants that make you wait 3 hours for a table. Surely something that hard to get must be worth having. Here's what they discovered in those 2025 connection studies from MIT. The average person spends 4.7 hours daily in parasocial rumination, thinking about relationships that exist primarily in their head. Fantasy arguments, imagined reconciliations, rehearsed confessions to people who've already forgotten your middle name. The velvet prison has no guards, because it doesn't need them. You are the architect, the warden, and the prisoner. The lock only works from the inside. There's an old Persian tale about a bird that spent so long in a cage, when someone finally opened the door, it had forgotten how to fly. But here's the version they don't tell. The bird remembered perfectly well. It simply preferred the certainty of captivity to the vertigo of sky. Kierkegaard, anxious, brilliant Soren, who broke off his engagement and spent the rest of his life writing about it, he understood this. He wrote about the aesthetic stage of existence, where we're so in love with our own melancholy that we cultivate it like a rare orchid. We water it with memory. We feed it with what-ifs. We display it to others, secretly proud of our exquisite suffering. But here's the truly unsettling part. The thing that would make even Machiavelli pause mid-sentence. The prison isn't built from their rejection. It's built from your inability to reject yourself. Every unanswered text is you telling yourself you're not enough. Every analyzed interaction is you putting yourself on trial. The prosecutor, judge, and defendant all share your face. Modern neuroscience calls it rumination. Medieval mystics called it acedia. I call it the terrible arithmetic of longing, where you subtract yourself to make room for someone who was never going to stay. So here's my question for you, and don't answer too quickly. Let it ferment in that space between your ribs where the important truths hide. What would you become if you stopped performing for an audience that left the theater years ago? The candle gutters. Wax hardens like resolve, somewhere in Florence, or in that room that exists only between sleeping and waking. Machiavelli sets down his quill and smiles. Not because he's discovered how to win at love, but because he's discovered something far more valuable. How to stop playing a game where losing is the only way to keep the other person interested. The velvet prison. Beautiful, comfortable, voluntary. And the door has always been open. Desire's infinite appetite for its own starvation. There's a peculiar species of moth, Calyptra thalictri, that evolved to drink tears, from fruit juice to lacrimal fluid, sweetness to salt. Scientists call it adaptation. I call it a perfect metaphor for what we've become. Sigh. Let me tell you about hunger. Not the kind that empties your stomach, but the kind that empties your soul and convinces you the hollowing is holy. In the summer of 1503, Cesare Borgia taught Machiavelli something about power that never made it into The Prince. They were standing in a conquered city, bodies still warm, smoke still rising. And Borgia said, "The secret isn't to satisfy ambition. It's to cultivate an ambition that can never be satisfied." He was talking about statecraft. He was accidentally describing modern love. The room smells of burnt coffee and dead flowers, that particular perfume of morning after regret. Someone's phone buzzes with notifications from dating apps, each swipe a tiny genuflection at the altar of infinite choice. Hinge, Bumble, Tinder. The names themselves sound like symptoms of a disease we've convinced ourselves is the cure. Here's what the algorithms know that you don't. Satisfaction is bad for business. A 2024 Stanford study found that dating apps deliberately optimize for engagement over success. They feed you just enough hope to keep swiping, never enough to stop. It's the same principle casinos use, except the jackpot is someone who might love you back. And the house always wins because the house is loneliness incorporated. But we're not victims of technology. We're accomplices. Nietzsche, syphilitic and brilliant, wrote about the will to power while slowly going mad in Turin. But he missed the joke. It's not the will to power, it's the will to want. We're so terrified of satisfaction we've made gods of our appetites. I'll tell you a story, not a comfortable one. There was a king, Persian, Greek, does it matter, who fell in love with a woman made of morning mist. Each dawn she would appear, and each dawn he would try to embrace her, and each dawn she would dissipate at his touch. His advisors begged him to stop. His kingdom crumbled while he chased vapor. But here's the part they leave out of the fairy tale. When a witch offered to make her solid, real, embraceable, The king refused. "Then what would I do with my mornings?" he asked. We are all that king. We are all that mist. The Instagram posts at golden hour, the carefully curated vulnerability, the text message drafted 17 times to seem effortless. We're not trying to catch someone. We're trying to catch ourselves trying. The performance has become more real than the person performing it. Modern research from the Karolinska Institute, 2025, shows something horrifying. Our brains now release more dopamine from the anticipation of romantic validation than from receiving it. The waiting has become sweeter than the having. We've evolved into creatures that prefer hunting to eating, and then we wonder why we're starving. Schopenhauer had a parable about porcupines in winter. Too close, and they wound each other with their quills. Too far, and they freeze. So they spend eternity adjusting the distance, never quite comfortable, never quite willing to be alone. But Schopenhauer was an optimist. He thought the porcupines wanted warmth. What if they wanted the quills? What if the wound is the point? There's a word in Portuguese, saudade, for missing something you never had. The Germans have Sehnsucht, longing for longing itself. But we've invented something new, something neither language has a word for yet. Addiction to emotional absence, where the void becomes more comfortable than any presence could be. Dating profiles read like resumes for a job nobody actually wants. Love hiking went once in 2019. Foodie eats food to survive. Looking for something real, terrified of anything real. When we're advertising ourselves to other advertisements, avatars courting avatars, while the actual humans behind the screens grow translucent from lack of use. Here's what Machiavelli understood that the dating coaches don't. Power lies not in being desired, but in maintaining desirability. The moment you're chosen, you begin to decay. The moment you choose, you reveal your mortality. So we hover in the spaces between, neither rejecting nor accepting, neither alone nor together, feeding on the possibility of feeding. A woman I knew, brilliant, beautiful, perpetually almost in love, once told me she breaks up with men the moment she realizes she could be happy with them. Happiness would ruin me, she said, stirring her third martini with a finger that wore rings from 3 different almost engagements. I'm built for yearning. It's my career. And isn't it all of ours now? Professional yearners, career wanters. Our LinkedIn profiles should list desire management as a core competency. The Buddha said desire is suffering, but the Buddha never had to watch someone's Instagram story and pretend not to care. The Buddha never had to calculate how long to wait before responding to a text to seem interested but not desperate. The Buddha achieved enlightenment under a Bodhi tree, not under the fluorescent lights of existential FOMO. So here's the terrible mathematics. We want to be wanted by people we don't quite want, by people who want to be wanted by us, but don't quite want us either. It's desire all the way down, turtles standing on turtles, each one swiping left on the turtle beneath it. The moth that drinks tears has evolved past the need for sweetness. It sustains itself on sorrow, and perhaps that's what we're becoming. Creatures that have evolved past the need for love, sustaining ourselves on the absence of it, growing stronger on what starves us. Tell me this, and be honest. The truth is already ugly enough. When did you start preferring the knife to the medicine? And why does the cutting feel so much like cure? The hunger that feeds on feeding. The thirst that drinks makes drier. Somewhere, Machiavelli laughs. Not because it's funny, but because laughter is the only reasonable response to a species that invented infinite choice and chose to choose nothing, forever. where every reflection shows who you were pretending to be. A man walks into a therapist's office. This isn't a joke, though perhaps it is in the cosmic sense. He says, "I don't know who I am when no one's watching." The therapist responds, "Who told you someone's watching?" The man begins to cry, but he's not sure if the tears are real or if he's performing sadness for an audience of one. This is where we live now, the theater of broken mirrors, where every reflection shows a different performance, and we've forgotten which one was supposed to be real. Machiavelli wrote La Mandragola, a comedy so dark it makes tragedy look optimistic. It's about a man who helps another man seduce his own wife. Everyone wears masks. Everyone knows everyone is wearing masks, and everyone pretends not to know. He was writing about Renaissance Florence. He was prophesying your last relationship. The stage is set with familiar props. The bathroom mirror where you practice arguments. The phone screen that's become more familiar than your own face. The carefully orchestrated spontaneity of a first date where both people have already stalked each other's entire digital history but pretend to be surprised by basic information. "Oh, you like travel? How interesting." Here's what the 2025 Cambridge neuroscience studies won't tell you directly but imply in their data. We now spend more time curating our identity than living it. The average person dedicates 6.3 hours daily to identity management, choosing photos, crafting posts, editing their story until even they believe it. But the tragedy isn't that we're performing. Humans have always performed. Ask Shakespeare, ask Jung with his personas, ask Goffman with his presentation of self. The tragedy is that we've forgotten it's a performance. The actor has become convinced he is Hamlet, and now he can't leave the stage. Let me paint you a picture in shadows and smoke. Venice, 1750. Carnevale. Everyone wears masks, but there's a rumor of one particular mask maker who creates masks so perfect they become more real than the face beneath. People wear them and find they cannot remove them, not because of any curse or glue, but because they prefer the mask to what lies underneath. The mask maker grows rich. The city grows empty. Behind every beautiful facade, nothing but the echo of what someone thought they should be. This isn't a fairy tale. This is your Instagram feed. Kierkegaard wrote about the aesthetic life, living for appearances, for the next experience, the next performance. But even he couldn't imagine a world where the aesthetic life would be the only life, where the performance never ends because the curtain never falls, where the audience is everyone and no one, always watching, never truly seeing. A study from Tokyo University, 2024, found that people in modern relationships spend more time discussing their relationship with others than experiencing it with each other. We're all directors of a movie about our own lives, forgetting we're supposed to be living it, not filming it. The dating profile that reads like ad copy. The vulnerability performed for likes. The breakup announced for sympathy. The new relationship revealed for validation. We're method actors who've forgotten we're acting, trapped in a role we wrote for ourselves but no longer remember writing. Here's what's truly grotesque. We judge others for their performances while convinced our own is authentic. We see through everyone's masks except the one melted onto our own face. We're all imposters suffering from reverse imposter syndrome, convinced we're the only real person in a world of actors. There's an ancient Greek word, prosopon, that meant both face and mask. The Greeks understood something we've forgotten. The face you show the world is a mask. The question isn't whether you're wearing one, but whether you remember how to take it off. I knew a couple, let's call them the perfects, who documented every moment of their relationship. Professional photo shoots, anniversary videos, couples TikToks, Their breakup was so sudden, it left their followers genuinely confused. She told me later, "We spent so much time showing everyone how in love we were. We forgot to actually fall in love." But here's the Machiavellian twist. What if falling in love is just another performance? What if authenticity is just a more sophisticated mask? What if the broken mirrors are showing us the truth? That there's no real self behind all the performances, just an infinite regression of watchers watching nothing. Schopenhauer believed we were all representations of will, not real individuals but manifestations of a blind force. He was too pessimistic. We're not manifestations of will. We're manifestations of Wi-Fi, performing ourselves into existence one post at a time. The broken mirrors multiply. Each reflection shows a different angle of the same emptiness. The theater fills with actors who've forgotten their acting, audiences who've forgotten their watching. And somewhere in the back row, Machiavelli takes notes for a comedy so dark it circles back to light, but a harsh light, the kind that shows every flaw in the makeup, every wire holding up the flying actors, every prompter in the wings feeding lines to people who believe they're speaking from the heart. Modern love is two performers on a stage, each convinced the other is the audience, both waiting for applause, neither willing to break character first. So here's my question, and let it shatter against your newest mask. If you stopped performing yourself, would anyone notice the difference? Including you? The theater of broken mirrors. Every seat is the best seat. Every seat shows you nothing but yourself pretending to be yourself for people pretending to care. The show never ends. The reviews are always mixed. And the only way out is to remember that you bought the ticket, you chose the seat, and the exit has always been lit. But who would you be in the parking lot without a script? Who would you be? What grows from trying to plant flowers in someone else's desert? In the Museum of Broken Relationships in Zagreb, there's a small packet of tomato seeds. The placard reads, "He said we'd plant them together. I've kept them for 7 years. They're dead now, but so is everything else we planned to grow." Pause. Tonight, let's talk about cultivation. That beautiful lie we tell ourselves about changing people through patience, about watering dead things until they bloom, about gardens that exist only in the future tense. Machiavelli knew about gardens. His exile to Sant'Andrea was supposed to be punishment, but he found something worse than imprisonment: the terrible freedom of watching things fail to grow despite perfect conditions. He wrote to a friend, "I have learned that the earth refuses some seeds not from cruelty, but from honesty. The air tastes of rust and resignation. Somewhere, someone is saving texts like pressed flowers, convinced that preserving death makes it less dead. Someone else is explaining their partner's cruelty to friends, adding water and sunlight to the story until neglect looks like love having a bad day." Here's what they discovered in the 2025 Stockholm Relationship Institute study. The average person spends 3.7 years trying to change someone who explicitly told them they wouldn't change. We're gardeners in denial, planting seeds in concrete and blaming ourselves when nothing grows. But the concrete isn't the problem. The seed isn't the problem. The problem is the gardener who believes their love is so special it can make stones bloom. Dostoevsky wrote about this kind of love, the kind that needs suffering to prove its worth. If it doesn't hurt, is it even real? If they don't need fixing, what's your purpose? We've turned love into a rehabilitation center where everyone's both patient and doctor, and nobody ever gets discharged. Let me tell you about the garden of dead seeds. It's everywhere and nowhere, like those nightmares that follow you into waking. A woman collects her boyfriend's promises like rare orchid bulbs. I'll change. Next time will be different. I'm working on myself. She plants them in careful rows, waters them with forgiveness, shields them from the harsh light of reality. Years pass. Nothing grows. But she's invested so much in this garden that admitting it's barren would mean admitting she's been talking to soil, singing to stones, loving a scarecrow she dressed up like a person. The sunk cost fallacy of the heart. Every failed harvest demands another season of trying. Maybe different fertilizer, maybe more sunlight. Maybe if she just believes harder, loves louder, forgives faster. The garden of dead seeds grows larger, but never grows anything. Nietzsche's eternal return. Imagine living this same day forever. Now imagine that day is you trying to resurrect something that was never alive forever. This is where most of us live. Eternal, futile spring, planting corpses and calling it hope. There's a Japanese term, tsuchi, that means both soil and hammer. The same ground that nourishes can also break you. Depends on how you meet it. With seeds or with your skull over and over, expecting different results. A 2024 behavioral study from Milan found that people in toxic relationships show the same neural patterns as gambling addicts, but with one crucial difference. They're not addicted to winning. They're addicted to almost winning. To that moment right before failure, when everything still seems possible. The Garden of Dead Seeds is really a casino where you bet your years on someone else's potential, and the house always wins because the house is built on the foundation of who they actually are, not who you need them to be. But here's what's truly sinister. What would make even Machiavelli's fox pause mid-hunt? We don't want the seeds to grow. Growth would mean the project is complete. The patient is cured. The garden doesn't need us anymore. And then what? Who are we without someone to fix? What do we do with hands that only know how to tend failure? There's a species of wasp that lays its eggs in living caterpillars. The larvae eat the host from inside, carefully avoiding vital organs to keep it alive as long as possible. The caterpillar continues its life, even forms a chrysalis. But what emerges isn't a butterfly. It's more wasps. This is what we do to each other in the name of love. Plant ourselves inside someone else's potential and feed on it until there's nothing left but our own hunger wearing their skin. I heard a story, maybe true, maybe necessary, about a man who spent 20 years trying to save a woman who didn't want to be saved. When she finally left, he didn't know what to do with his hands. They'd learned only one gesture, reaching for someone who wasn't reaching back. He started a garden, a real one. Everything died. Turns out, he'd only ever known how to cultivate failure. Sartre said hell is other people. He was wrong. Hell is your own hope. Hell is that packet of seeds you carry everywhere, looking for soil that doesn't exist, for water that won't come, for sunlight in someone else's permanent winter. The Garden of Dead Seeds, where every "I can change him" is a shovel digging your own grave, where every "she just needs time" is another year of talking to tombstones, where love becomes indistinguishable from landscaping a cemetery. So here's what I need you to answer, in that honest place behind your ribs where the truth grows wild. What would happen if you stopped trying to garden in graveyards and finally admitted that some people are meant to be exactly what they are? Desert, winter, stone, and that loving them doesn't mean watering them, but learning to love the drought. The seeds are dead. They were dead when you got them. They'll be dead when you finally let them go. And somewhere in that acceptance is the only thing that can actually grow. The terrible, liberation of empty hands. No more gardens, no more seeds, just the wild, untended truth of what is, not what you wish it were. The strange dignity of choosing your own ruins. Here, at the end of all things, let me tell you about the man who loved his chains so much he had them gilded. It's 3 a.m. in the museum of your past relationships. Every exhibit is perfectly preserved. The fight about nothing that revealed everything. The last kiss that tasted like goodbye but you pretended was hello. The moment you knew it was over, but stayed another year because leaving felt like admitting you'd wasted the previous 3. You're the curator, the guard, and the only visitor. Admission is free, but the cost is everything. Machiavelli, dying in San Casciano, wrote one final letter that was never sent, found in his papers yellowed with age and something that might have been wine or tears. I have learned that princes and lovers make the same mistake. They believe ruling and possessing are the same thing. But the crown is always thorns, the throne is always cold, and the only power is in choosing which thorns, choosing which cold. The room fills with smoke that isn't there. The walls breathe with memories that won't stay dead. Somewhere, a clock ticks backward, but time moves forward anyway, dragging us into futures we've already lived. Here's what the 2025 meta-analysis from the Berlin Institute didn't mean to discover, but did. People who stay in unhappy relationships report higher self-esteem than those who leave for happiness. The researchers couldn't explain it, but I can. We're in love with our suffering because it's the only thing that's truly ours. Nobody can take your pain. They can dismiss it, minimize it, mock it, but they can't take it. It's your crown of thorns, and you polish it every night before bed, counting each sharp point like a rosary of regrets. Jung called it the shadow. Freud called it the death drive. I call it the last sovereignty of the dispossessed. When everything else has been taken, dignity, hope, the future you planned, you still have your wounds, and you'll be damned if anyone's going to heal them without your permission. Let me paint you one final picture, in blood and gold. There's a cathedral, maybe in Prague, maybe in your chest, where people go to confess not their sins, but their attachments. They whisper to the darkness, "I can't let go of someone who let go of me years ago. I'm addicted to rejection. I only feel alive when I'm dying inside." The priest, if there is one, says nothing. Because what is there to say to someone who's made a religion of their ruins? But here's the beautiful, terrible Machiavellian truth that makes all the others look like children's stories. You're not broken. You're not sick. You're not wrong. You're just finally honest about what humans are. Creatures that choose their own catastrophes and call it free will. We don't stumble into suffering. We architect it, design it, renovate it when it gets too comfortable. We're artists, and agony is our medium. Every toxic relationship you stayed in, you weren't trapped. You were composing. Every red flag you ignored, not blindness, aesthetic choice. You were creating a masterpiece of suffering so exquisite that leaving would be like burning the Mona Lisa because her smile makes you sad. The Stockholm Syndrome of the soul, where you're both captor and captive, and you've fallen in love with the elegant efficiency of your own imprisonment. A man once told me, 3 drinks in, 2 divorces deep, I don't choose the wrong women. I choose the right women for the wrong I want to feel. He raised his glass to toast his own destruction. I've never seen anyone look so free. Because here's what Machiavelli knew, what Nietzsche knew, what you know in that place beneath knowing, amor fati, love of fate. But fate isn't what happens to you, It's what you choose to keep happening to you. The crown of thorns you polish until it shines. The throne of ice you refuse to abdicate. The kingdom of one where you're both tyrant and revolutionary, forever overthrowing yourself, forever reinstating the same regime. And maybe, that's not pathology. Maybe that's power. The last power left in a world that's taken everything else. The power to choose your own chains, crown your own thorns, build your own beautiful ruins, and live in them like a king in exile who's forgotten he holds the keys to his own kingdom. Every Sunday, you polish the thorns. Every Monday, you put the crown back on. Every Friday, you bleed in all the same places. But the blood is yours. The crown is yours. The choice is yours. And that's the final secret. The one Machiavelli took to his grave. The one that makes all the others irrelevant. You don't need to be happy. You don't need to be healed. You don't need to be whole. You just need to be honest about what you're choosing. And choose it with the terrible dignity of someone who knows they're both architect and ruins, both hammer and nail, both the love and the war it declares on itself. So here's my final question. The one that ends everything or begins it. If you could stop polishing the crown of thorns tomorrow, would you? Or have you finally admitted that the pain is not a bug, but a feature? Not a wound, but a window. Not a prison, but the last palace where you're still sovereign. The crown of thorns you polish. It's yours. It's always been yours. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything.